BETAFPV, Mr. Shutterberg brings us a video explaining the issue, but basically, BETAFPV has shipped their F4 1S flight controllers, and with those 1S flight controllers, they have the ICM 20689 gyroscope. So most gyros we know for the MPU 6000, that's the typical ones. We've heard of something about the BMI gyros lately, the BMI 270s. ICM is a different option from TDK, who makes them, and that some people have chosen to use. There was a bug we reported on in RC6 that causes your flight controller to brick the gyro, so the gyro will stop working. In some cases, it was temporary. In some cases, it didn't happen. And in some cases, it was permanent,
now
which is unfortunate.
Notice that here in Mr. Shutterbug's video, which is linked in the show notes, he's moving the whoop on the yaw axis, but the on-screen whoop is not moving at all. His yaw axis basically doesn't exist. And this is caused, now this was a known bug in Betaflight 4.3 RC6. There's a known bug that they put it right at the top of the show notes, of the release notes. There's a bug, it can brick your gyro. And so theoretically, anybody who flashes RC6 to a board with a 2689 gyro had fair warning, although you're going to rant about that at the end. But this is even worse, because these people aren't flashing Betaflight 4.3 RC6, are they?
Right. They're buying a flight controller with it on it. And it's the manufacturers who are shipping it. And unfortunately, basically you plug it in and it bricks that gyro. So the way to recover this, so if anybody's having this issue...
You buried the lead there. I'm sorry. Can I pause you? Let's rewind that. You bought a brand new BETAFPV Tiny Whoop. BETAFPV shipped it with RC6 on it. Why would you ship with a release candidate? I don't know. Maybe it has because they need Express LRS support, and that's the only way to get it. Fine. Yeah. The minute you plug in, the first time it loads that firmware, because they didn't QC it, they just flashed it and shipped it. It's never been powered up since they flashed it. The minute you do that, RC6 bricks the gyro some of the time. You didn't flash RC6.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it sucks. I mean, listen, it sucks, but like, at this point, it's just BETAFPV. Like, this is very BETAFPV to do. But
so there's a workaround.
There's a workaround. So if you have this board and you have not booted it yet, or you booted it and it hasn't died, I would consider never booting it again normally, and then holding the boot button down and plugging it in so that it boots into DFU. That means the Betaflight software will not talk to the gyro and won't write the weird index bit stuff it was doing, and then you can flash to the release candidate version or the release version of Betaflight 4.3, and you should be all good to go.
Now, 661FPV is disagreeing with us here. 661FPV in the chat says they must have powered it up after the factory flashed the board. Which
I don't think that's true.
Would make sense if they were QC checking. So they flash these chips, and the way they flash them at the factory, I don't know exactly how they do it, but there's no reason that it actually needs to run the code after it flashes the code, and there's no reason that they would necessarily have powered these up and QC'd them after they manufactured them. So I think this is and in fact, Mr. Shutterbug tested this, and the problem is that it doesn't brick the 2689 gyro 100% of the time.
Yeah, it seems to be batch related. It's just hard to tell because TDK is also confused about this, and they don't really understand how the gyros are getting bricked either. So there's a lot of confusion going on, and they're also just like, why are you guys using these? Because they're old gyros, and we said not to use these. Yeah. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on.
The takeaway is this. If you bought a flight controller with a 20689 gyro, and especially if you know for a fact that it's like this BETAFPV one that we know is shipping with RC6 on it, the best thing to do would be do not power it up, hold down the bootloader button, plug in and make it power up in bootloader mode so it doesn't run the code, and then immediately flash it to Betaflight 4.3 release, which doesn't have this problem as far as we know.
Yes.
It's going to wipe your config though. You're going to lose your factory config, right?
That's correct. Yeah, you probably just want to go on the BETAFPV website and get it. If you have a bind and fly, then you're going to go to that bind and fly on the BETAFPV website, get your CLI dump and stuff, and apply that. If you just bought a board, then it shouldn't matter, and you should just be able to work.
661FPV. Obviously they have to power up the chip to flash it, right? But I don't know the exact way that they flash it, whether they flash it in DFU mode or whether they flash it in some STM programming mode. But my guess would be that the chip is in programming mode. They write the code to the chip, and the code is not run. It's at the moment that the SPI bus tries to initialize the gyro that the gyro dies. So if they flashed the code but never ran the code, then that's what we're assuming is happening.
Correct.
Okay. Let's save it for the rant.
Yeah, that was kind of the idea. We'll just yell at a moment.
I want to start ranting, but this is PSAs. We're going to do the rant at the end. We'll save it for the rant, and we will move on. We covered our butts. Okay. Now it's time for our rant of the week, Blunty, and I feel like it's your rant, so you should get to introduce it. How would you like to introduce it?
So we talked a little bit in the PSA about Beta FPV shipping boards with ICM 20689 gyros with RC6, so they brick when you power them up. I have quite a few issues with this, and I feel like we can maybe talk a little bit about rational thought, and then we can maybe rant a little bit. Actually, I feel like it could fit both of these in this segment. So the first thing I want to mention is just like, how did the RC6 situation happen? Why was the RC6 still posted? Like things like that, right? Because basically my question to the devs was, and I talked a little bit to some of the guys today in the Discord, was basically like, once the issue was identified where people knew that there were gyros getting bricked, why was our RC6 not pulled? Why didn't we go back to RC5 and let RC5 coast until we had a solution in a new RC6 or RC7, right?
They put a big announcement at the top of the release notes. Hey, if you have a 2689 gyro, this might brick your gyro, but they didn't take it down. And I guess on the one hand, it's like, well, not everybody has that. Shouldn't the other people get to test RC6? But that's like, if you release something that makes like cars blow up 3% of the time, they do a recall. That's too many times. And the devs you would hope that the devs would care that people are bricking their gyros and be like, oh, we can't do this.
Yeah. So I think part of it is you got a lot of members on the team. You've got a lot of confusion when users do reports because you're never sure if a user's correct. There were also random reports at the time. There were also random reports at the time that users promising that this happened on RC5. So there were questions then, what if we roll back and we didn't need to, and then we've rolled back a firmware and there was no benefits from rolling back the firmware?
And there's a perspective of, hey, we told you it was a release candidate. Whenever you flash, and people get very complacent with release candidates because usually they're fine, but it is still not in final release, and it is possible there will be a new bug. And
so I think the bottom line is that this release was totally different than most releases will be moving forward. The devs have promised me that, and it seems from every indication that will be the case. This was a really extended release. There were changes in management, and there were basically major issues that caused delays where there was an SPI rewrite for the ELRS code already in RC. There was a big change in failsafes. There was all kinds of things that basically they felt like needed to happen. And part of this was because the cycle was so long.
You could argue
it might have been easier.
You could argue, yes, exactly. You could argue, why did they add support for a new gyro, new hardware, etc., in the middle of a release candidate or in the middle? Right. Why did they not wait for the next release? And it's like, well, it would have been 5 years until that. They wanted to support the customers, and their motivation there was sound. And I think we agree that adding support for that gyro, I mean, manufacturers started shipping product with that gyro, and the Betaflight devs said, hey, I guess we're going to support it. And they rushed to support it, and oops, there was a problem. So the devs are completely off the hook, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, I feel like what I'm saying is moving forward, I don't think this will happen again. I don't think it's really going to be possible from the way they're handling the release cycle, from the speed they're going to be moving things forward, and the way that the dev team is kind of, has a handle on what's going on. I think that it was kind of a scramble to get everything together and make everything work and take this whole giant jumble of stuff and fit it into 4.3 and make it all work. So I think moving forward, it seems like this will be a resolved issue. We shouldn't see something like this happen again. And if it does happen again, I think they better know how to handle it in the context of a smaller release with less full features and with hopefully there aren't a bunch of companies flashing release candidates onto their boards when they ship them.
This is what we're actually ranting about.
Yes.
It is. It's frustrating when manufacturers ship nightly builds. There was an old version of the Mobula 6 that shipped with a nightly build, a Betaflight 4. Whatever on it, and it had some bug in it, and like a year after that version of Betaflight was released, they were still shipping it with that gosh darn nightly build on it. Manufacturers, in this case, though, I think that the justification is there because some of these boards had flight controllers with ExpressLRS SPI receivers on them, and they simply could not run without Betaflight 4.3.
The justification for flashing a release candidate is proper. I do agree with that. And part of the reason I say, like, I think future will be different is because they won't have, hopefully, the same incentive to be flashing ahead, right? Hopefully we'll be more maintained and they'll have a better,
hopefully.
There won't be these goals. But also, there's, lost my train of thought. Basically, the other problem here is that you have to test things. Like, I'm of the opinion that if you sell a product, that product should have been tested before it leaves the factory. Like, I don't expect you to do crazy testing. I don't expect you to solder up a board to a flight.
Part of the rant where we shit on BETAFPV. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, 100%. Yeah, and anybody else who doesn't QC out of the factory, we know they're not doing that because they don't even boot the board the first time to have it break. Right. And I think part of my problem is that you could do things to simulate a test environment that I don't think would add that much labor, right? Like, I can't imagine how much labor it would add for you to have some system that, like, you just write the Betaflight configurator side on your own to do the testing for you, like a test bench. And then when you plug it in, it just runs through all the checklists.
Does QC, this look like it? QC is a thing.
Properly?
And we know that because, for example, Brain FPV and SP Racing both brag, and deservedly so, that they QC every board before they ship it. I'm pretty sure that Brain FPV flashes the boards one by one at home on a laptop. I think I've seen photos of that, like on their Facebook or Instagram, which seems very time consuming. But by God, you know damn well and good it's been flashed and powered up. And a lot of times the attitude is we're going to ship the product. It probably will work. If it doesn't work, the retailer will replace it, which sometimes pans out and sometimes doesn't. And in a case like this, it really bites them in the ass because in this specific case, BETAFPV is they shipped a whole shitload of these tiny whoops with a release candidate that upon power up has a dice roll's chance of just bricking the gyro. And now what? You told me that they couldn't even replace them for you because they don't have any more.
Yeah, in that video we linked and is linked again in this rant, Mr. Shutterbug says that he contacted BETAFPV for a replacement. Yeah, and they were like, "Hey, we sold all these. We can't send you one," and that was their answer. Yeah. So he contacted Race Day Quads and they were able to do the exchange. But and then he got the new one, did the DFU when it worked. But unfortunately,
and how many people are unaware? They don't watch the FPV news, so I mean, I guess they get what they deserve, and they don't watch Mr. Shutterbug's channel. And they just buy this BETAFPV tiny whoop. Maybe it's their first quad. They power it up, and then the damn thing just spins up into the air.
Well, I'm just going to say, I don't know that I've seen that it is guaranteed to be on the prepackaged whoops. It's possible. I just haven't guaranteed to see that. What I've seen it on is the boards you buy. So if you buy,
it's only I see.
Yes, it may very possibly maybe on some of the whoops as well, because they're probably flashed the same way with the tool. And they're just all the configurations applied at once. So it may not even be booted either. They're probably not booted either, but I'm not aware of them on whoops yet. So it's very possible, but I have not confirmed that.
Well, it's the world we live in.
Anyway, listen, FPV, listen, Happy Model, whoever else is doing this, come the fuck on. Like, I don't think this is that hard. Like, this should be a great example of why you shouldn't do this. That's what I'm saying. Right? There's plenty of reasons you could do this and you get away with it for a long time and there's no problems. But when you run into issues like this, where you haven't tested something and you're sending a freaking release candidate out to a user and you haven't even booted the board and it's causing unrecoverable issues, like, sorry, that's really random, and sorry, that probably was never going to happen, and sorry, that's a crazy chance that was the case, that you happen to pick the RC that bricked these gyros, but like, that's on you. That's not on anybody else.
Yep.
So get it together.
Here's what it boils down to, Blunty. Yeah. It costs more to do proper QC than it does to ship a product and roll the dice and then eat the product when their reputation.
Hold on a minute. It must. Dude. Okay. Hold on, dude. Okay. Hold on. So my thought here is, like, they wrote a custom fucking tool for their radio. They can't write a custom tool to check the boards. They don't need a
Right.
person.
Why did they do
you just
that?
plug it into USB. You plug in the battery, and then it
made
does
a brand
beep, beep,
new
beep, beep,
radio.
beep.
They made their own forked version of OpenTX for their radios, and they wrote their own GUI to make users' life easier rather than just using OpenTX Companion.
Yeah.
But the time and human labor to QC these boards before they go out the door, can't do that.
I'm saying not even that time. I'm saying the time to write a tool so nobody has to do the job. I'm saying you could literally take a tool that you plug into USB and it does the work. No manual person has to ever look at anything. They literally just have to sit and plug a board in, or run it on the STM flasher. Maybe there's some way to do it through that. Like, I'm just saying, like, I feel like the effort has not been put in versus the idea that
I
there's
agree.
there's some idea that they're saving money. Like, I think it's just like they don't care. There's no reason that they need to do that. So anyway.
Alrighty. Well, I'm not gonna argue with you about that. I agree with you completely. Good rant.